Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle, HISC Seerah session 145. I think this is the 7th session we're doing on the Treaty of Hudaibiyah. I think it's taking a bit longer than I anticipated, to be honest, because there's still a few things left, so we might not finish it this week, but inshallah next week. But we'll also do the lessons of Surah Hudaybiyah, and we'll also do a quick look at Surah Al-Fath, which is revealed because of the Hudaybiyah. So still, at least a couple of sessions left, inshallah. But again, it is such a pivotal point in Islam. It's important to do in detail and to do properly. So alhamdulillah. And again, hopefully you can get a sense of its significance and all the tension around it. But the last time, don't want to go into too much detail, but the negotiations have started. The Prophet had taken a pledge of war, of fighting from the Muslims, because there's a rumor that Uthman had been killed. Then when the news of that pledge, Bayt al-Ridwan, got to the Quraysh, they panicked and freaked out, and they sent someone to stall the Prophet, and then they sent their big gun, Suhail bin Umar, to negotiate. So they've started a negotiation, and then it sort of gets off. And the Prophet had already pre-announced to the Muslims that he will agree to all their conditions, but obviously he hasn't said that to the Quraysh, and none of the Muslims would obviously say something so treasonous to Suhail. And so the Quraysh delegation comes, and the Prophet sitting with his entourage, they're negotiating, and we started off that the Prophet asked Umar Ali to write down the treaties as they're negotiating, agreeing things. But in the preamble, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Suhail objects. I don't recognize Ar-Rahman. You need to say Bi ismika Allahumma, right? In your name, O Allah. Okay, the Prophet agrees to that, and then the Prophet says, okay, this is what Muhammad Rasulullah has agreed with Suhail ibn Amr. And then Suhail objects that, no, we don't recognize you, Rasulullah. If we did, we wouldn't be here, fighting you and preventing you from Umrah if we'd recognize you as the messenger of Allah. So we're not having that. And Ali says, I'm not going to delete that. So the Prophet himself personally scrubbed that off the parchment, right? So then the Prophet says, yes, Wallahi, I am Rasulullah, even if you deny it. But I will write down Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Okay? And then the Prophet said, okay, fine. The Quraysh will let the Muslims do Umrah. And then Suhail goes, no. As for this year, it's a no. There's no way we will allow you to do this. Rather, you will come back next year. Right? And then when you come back next year, we will leave Mecca. We will vacate it for 3 days. And then you can do what you want. Do your Umrah and do your rituals, right? We'll go out, go to the hills outside. We'll have a festival or whatever, where we'll leave the city empty for you. Do what you want, but you're not doing Umrah this year. You're doing it next year, okay? And then fine. And then not a single man from Mecca, who defects over to Medina, you need to hand him back. Anyone that comes to you from us, you have to give him back. And then as they're saying that, his own son, Abu Jandal, who's been imprisoned and tortured by his own father, Suhail, right? He manages to escape Makkah in chains and runs over, exhausted, to the camp of the Muslims, and he's shouting for joy, "Oh Muslims, I found you!" And then as he's saying that, Suhail sees his own son. He freaks out and he goes, right, this is the first one to meet those conditions. I insist you hand him back. And Prophet says, no. Why? We haven't written it down yet, so you can't enforce it because it's not written down yet. And he goes, no, it's this or there's no treaty, right? Are you willing to throw everything away for him? And the Prophet begs him, please, just hand him over. Have it just as make him an exception. Gift him to me. He's begging Suhail. And Suhail goes, no, it's this or nothing. Yeah, this is, this is part of the deal. This is the agreement. The condition needs to start now. And then Abu Jandal, he's seeing that he is going to be handed back, and then he's pleading amongst the Muslims, how can you do this? Right? Are you going to send me back to the mushrikeen to be tortured? And then Mikras, Suhail's right-hand man, says, okay, fine. If we take him back, we promise not to torture him. Okay? And then, the Muslims are really riled up by this, and Umar, obviously very emotional, he stands up, he goes over to Abu Jandal and says, look, these people, they're worth nothing. Your blood is worth more. Here, take my sword, finish it off. It's not our business, but if you do it, do it. But then, Abu Jandal knows it's his own father. He can't take it on himself to do that. And the Prophet ﷺ addresses him and says, be patient, Abu Jandal, for verily Allah will make a way out for you. So that's, and then he sort of gets dragged back to Mecca. And so we're at that part of the negotiation where they're still agreeing on the terms. So no Umrah this year, but they will be allowed next year. And again, this feels like humiliation for the Muslims, because they've come out in Ihram with the sacrificial animals in the holy months to do Umrah, and never in the history of the Arabs has anyone been prevented from doing Umrah, and they've been told they cannot do it. Right? They've been marching for weeks on end. They've been camped here for days, right? And they've been told they can't do Umrah. Completely unheard of. I mean, completely devastated. And then on top of that, okay, they can do it next year, but that's not the point. They've come out. On top of that, they've seen one of their own being dragged back. So then Suhail, he's got the wind up his tail. So then he adds another condition, which is really just driving home. This is vindictiveness. This is driving home the humiliation upon the Muslims. Again, you can see he's a strategist. He's a politician. He's a wordsmith we talked about before. He is the right man for the job from the Quraysh point of view. So then he's sort of really flexing himself now, and he goes, okay, fine. So if any Muslim, right, comes to Mecca, or any one of your own who comes to Mecca having rejected Islam, right, and becomes one of us, he shall not be returned, right? And this is completely unilateral. This is just a complete one-way agreement. If someone runs away from Mecca to Medina, he has to be returned to Mecca. If someone runs away from Medina to Mecca, we get to keep him, right? So this is, this is just even more humiliation for the Muslims, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, who said before he'd agree to those conditions, he agrees to those conditions. And the Sahabi are just completely, understandably, deflated, demoralized, and they're just blown away by this. This is complete injustice as they see it, right? And the Prophet, he knows that, right? But he is under express obligations from Allah. He has to obey these conditions. They go against his very being, his sense of justice, right? It goes against who he is, his love for the Ummah, his love for the people, his love for the Kaaba, right? Goes against everything he's been, talking about for the last 10, 15 years, right? And he has to accept these conditions, not because he's a master political strategist. This is wahi of Allah. He's been forced, he's been instructed to accept whatever condition they put on him, right? Even though he doesn't like it, right? So then the next part of the agreement is that there will be a peace for 10 years. And I'm not sure if this comes from Suhail or if this comes from Prophet ﷺ, but they agree that there will be peace between the two, the Quraysh, Mecca, and the Muslims of Medina, for a period of 10 years. And for 10 years, neither side will fight, right? And the phrase that they use is no armors, no sword. Okay? So the cessation of all war activities for 10 years, a suspension of war for 10 years, during which both parties will live in full security and neither will raise the sword against each other. Okay? And again, you can see from the Quraysh point of view, they are desperate for this because, as the Prophet ﷺ said earlier on, at the beginning of the negotiations, war has exhausted the Quraysh, right? They are completely exhausted by the wars that they've been fighting: Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, Ahzab, right? All of these things, they've just been obsessed by this, and it's consumed them, and the caravans are all raided, and this is just it has literally, mentally, economically, and emotionally broken the Quraysh. So it's in their interest. They want some respite for 10 years so they can build up again, right? So for 10 years, there'll be no fighting between them, okay? And cessation of hostilities. In the next part of the treaty, both of the two sides can engage with treaties with any other entity. And if any tribe is entered with the Muslims, all of these conditions are applied to that tribe. And the same if any tribe enters into agreement with the Quraysh, they will have to abide by the terms of the treaty. Right? And finally, there is a full right for each camp to negotiate with any other group. Okay, so these last things are just wider political agreements or political aspects of the treaty. Right? So no Umrah this year, Umrah next year. Anyone leaves Medina, comes to Mecca, we keep him. Anyone leaves Mecca, goes to Medina, you send him back. And peace for 10 years. You can make peace with any, if anyone allies to either party, they are also bound by that treaty. And again, that's an important clause. So you can't act by proxy, so it's about ensuring that the treaty is robust, and that you don't and that there's goodwill on both sides. You don't although you don't physically fight each other, you don't fight each other through proxies. And again, the Muslims were affected with the Battle of Ahzab because of the mercenaries and the proxy war that the Quraysh and the Jewish tribes had got. So they're making sure that situation doesn't happen again. No war by proxy. So if you're formally allied with any other tribe, they are bound by the same articles of the treaty. And finally, each camp can negotiate with any other group. Okay, so now there's going to be a full frontal assault on both sides to convince all the other tribes to ally to each other, and they can do that independently. So that is basically the conditions of the treaty. And yes, they, on the surface, are fairly one-sided. Certainly they're more favourable towards the Quraysh than the Muslims, right? And you could argue that this is, in fact, based on that, it would rank humiliation for the Muslims because it is so one-sided, right? But again, there's just these minor bits of the treaty that rankle the Muslims, but they are significant. So on the Muslim side, you had Abu Bakr, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Uthman and Ali, right, being formal witnesses to the signing of the treaty. And the Quraysh, Suhail, Mecca, and a few others that the books mentioned were the formal signatories. So this is a proper treaty. It's signed. Obviously, there's going to be a copy each, and they'll sign both copies, exchange them, right, and then go back their own way. And again, soon after that, when we heard from some of the leaders of the Khuzā that were part of the earlier first round of negotiations. They were allies of Banu Hashim. They formally allied themselves with the Muslims in the ranks of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Because they were allowed to do that. They were given permission. So the Banu Khuzā, they allied with the Muslims, and Banu Bakr, they allied with the Quraysh, and we talked about both of these tribes. But then, so that's essentially the end of the treaty. They go back, but we haven't finished with the episode of Hudaibiyah yet. And what you see in the last couple of conditions of the Treaty of Hudaibiyah, and we'll talk about this in more detail, inshallah, soon when we do the lessons, is that you've got an acceptance, an acknowledgement from the Quraysh that the Muslims aren't a band of renegades, turncoats and terrorists and extremists. They are actually a fully fledged political entity. They're a state, and they are able, or they're in a position to formally negotiate as equals with the Quraysh. If you're, hitherto the Quraysh haven't seen the Muslims as equals. They've seen them as being extremists, as terrorists, as fundamentalists, as renegades, as people working against society and going against their norms. They're lower people who are only worthy of being fought and killed and exterminated. But now they're having to treat them as equals. If you're in that position of superiority, and you think you're in that superiority and have the upper hand, you're not going to enter into that peace treaty and allow other people the honor and dignity of being an equal to you on and sitting on the same table, right? You would dictate to them, you would force your conditions upon them. Here, by negotiating, you are actually recognizing the fact that they are now your equals. So in the wider political context, this is a humiliation for the Quraysh, that they have now to recognize the Muslims as an equal political entity, right? Hitherto they've been trying to marginalize them and ignore them and fight them, but now they have to deal with the new reality, right? And so, the Muslims are an independent, powerful entity, and the battle lines for the next few years have been drawn, right? Before, it was the Quraysh against the Muslims, right? And that's what the battle was, the Quraysh and their allies against the Muslims. But now you've got a crystallization of the new terms of the interaction, of the interface of the battle. It's no longer just the Muslims against the Quraysh. This is now turned into the Meccan state and tribes against the Medinan state and the tribes, right? The Islamic State against the mushrikeen of Medina. So we would say truth against falsehood, Islam against paganism, right? So this is a new way, a new paradigm of looking at the world of the time, right? It's gone beyond these few renegades in Mecca. This is now the truth against the falsehood, right? So the whole of the Arabian Peninsula is now being forced to choose sides. Are you on the side of the Quraysh, or are you on the side and the pagans, or are you on the side of the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ, right? So you've got a crystallization of actually what the issues are. So Suhail, I mean, he's done a blinder of a negotiation. He's going back all happy and content, and and sort of validated the confidence that the Quraysh showed in him. And the Muslims are completely, utterly dejected and deflated. I mean, they as we've said many times, they came out peaceful purposes to do the Umrah and go back, sacrifice animals, donate the meat and go back, right? And they thought that they had politically outmaneuvered the Quraysh. The Quraysh tried to stop them and block their path. They outmaneuvered them. They ended up in Hudaibiyah, and there was no way on earth that the Quraysh can stop them from Umrah, because it has never been done in the history of the Arabs that people, let alone a whole tribe, a group has been prevented from Umrah, and yet these are the first persons in history to be prevented from that. And not only that, the indignity of having to send back their own, this is just unbelievable. And then people from their ranks who go over to them, they get to stay, and it's just unbelievable. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, he's the one who had the self-confidence. Everyone's thinking this. Have the self-confidence to go up to the Prophet ﷺ and because they've all been listening to the negotiations and essentially challenge the Prophet ﷺ. And so he's verbalizing what the other Muslims are feeling, right? Sensing. 1 second. So you have Umar ibn al-Khattab. He's coming to the Prophet ﷺ, and obviously you can see I've got the lamp because it's getting towards Maghrib time. So hopefully I'll finish before that. So Umar comes up to the Prophet ﷺ, and again other people can hear this, and Umar, he's challenging the Prophet ﷺ. This is completely unheard of. So he's saying, "Are you not the messenger of Allah? And and these are rhetorical questions. Are you not the messenger of Allah? And obviously, the Prophet is. He goes, are we not upon the truth, and the enemies upon misguidance? Then how can we accept the lower hand and the humiliation and being disgraced whilst being in Islam? Right? So, again, the Prophet says, I can only do what I have been commanded to do. But here you've got Umar challenging him. I mean, this is mind blowing. Part of the negotiations has just been completed, and one of your trusted mates and viziers coming up and says, "What the heck have you done? Essentially, how could you do this to us? Aren't you the messenger? Aren't we upon the truth? And aren't the enemies upon misguidance? Now, how can we be humiliated and accept the lower hand whilst we have Islam?" Right? And so the Prophet ﷺ replied, I am the messenger of Allah, and I will not disobey him, and he will help me. He doesn't know the full wisdom of Hudaibiyah and the treaty, right? But it is evident here, and for those people who try to abuse the treaty of Hudaibiyah for their own political ends and twist it, to say we can do anything as a treaty negotiation, we can give up any Muslim land, we can hand over anyone we want or whatever because the Prophet ﷺ did it, therefore it's allowed for us to do it. The thing that they don't grasp is that wasn't political calculation from the Prophet ﷺ. This was wahi. He had to do it. Allah had ordered him to do it. And the Prophet ﷺ is basically just saying, my hands are tied. I had to do this, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ said, I've been commanded to do this, and I will not disobey him, and he will help me, right? And so it's quite clear that this is wahi, this is revelation, right? And he has to do this, right? And he doesn't know where it's going to end up. He doesn't know the outcome of this, but he puts his trust in Allah. So and he goes on to say, Allah has told me to accept the conditions, and I will not disobey me, and he will help me. Obviously, Umar can't argue with that. So then Umar tries something else, and he goes, Ya Rasulullah, didn't you tell us that we would be doing tawaf and going around the Kaaba? You told us that, but we are not doing it now. I mean, again, this is just mind-blowing. He's essentially saying, you lied to us. You said we were going to do Umrah. We all came, all happy and jolly and everything, and we trusted you. You lied to us. You said we would do Umrah, right? And again, it's just unbelievable that he would have the guts to say that. But this is the character of Umar, wears his heart on his sleeve, right? And again, the Prophet ﷺ has never been challenged by his own, people like this. But again, just showing his character, he's very calm and respectful, and says, "Indeed, I told you, but did I say we will do it this year?" And then Umar goes, "No." So the Prophet says, "So you'll do it next year. My vision will come true, and Allah didn't tell me what year. I assumed it would be this year, but now we know it will be next year." Just completely, turns it around on Umar, right? And so at the outset, when the Prophet ﷺ saw that dream that he is doing Umrah, he's shaving his hair, right? He assumed himself as well that it would be this year. And he set out, he's got the Muslims, and they're all marching out. And, he had that firm conviction that they would do Umrah this year. But through these negotiations, he's come to realize that Allah didn't promise him, Allah promised him Umrah, but not this year. So he's basically just conveying the same thing. to the companions that, yeah, you're going to do Umrah. I didn't promise you it would happen this year. I just said we will do Umrah. But the treaty says we will come back next year and do it. There you go. We'll come back next year and you will do it. Right? So my vision will come true. I have full confidence in that. So and so then the Umar, he has to accept it, but he then goes to Abu Bakr Siddiq, and he's still fuming by the whole episode. So he goes to Abu Bakr Siddiq, who's heard all of this conversation, because this is happening out loud. This is almost like mutiny, and sedition in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Right, and Umar then goes to Abu Bakr and says the same things. And again, this is probably an earshot of people, right? Is he not the messenger? Are we not upon the truth and the enemy is upon misguidance? How can we accept the lower hand and the humiliation when and being disgraced while we have been blessed with Islam? And then Abu Bakr, he flips, right? And we've seen how he can flip when he said some rude things to one of the other delegates earlier on. But he just, he very harshly says to Umar, "Oh, Rajul, oi, you over there, watch out. He is the messenger of Allah, and he will not disobey his Lord. So you hang on to the stirrup of his saddle, otherwise there's going to be no hope for you." Abu Bakr realizes the pernicious nature of what Umar's trying to do and undermine everything, right? And he's really telling Umar off in a really harsh way. He is the messenger. He will not disobey his Lord. And again, it's just, reiterating those things. And you need to hang on to the stirrup of his saddle, otherwise there's no hope for you, right? And so, and then he goes on to say, yes, indeed, he said we will do tawaf, but he did not say this year. So we will come back and do it next year. So you can get a sense of the anger in Abu Bakr Siddiq's voice when he is publicly dressing down Umar bin Khattab, even though the Prophet ﷺ has politely, told off Umar. And then after this, Umar was really shaken by this, and he'd realized the error of the folly of his words. His emotions got the best of him, and how close he was coming to kufr. So I'll just pause for a second. So just another 4 or 5 minutes, inshallah. So Umar recognized the error of his ways, this mistake, this sort of coming close to kufr almost, you could say, and he's been politely shooed away by the Prophet ﷺ. He's been told off in front of everyone by Abu Bakr Siddiq, and he goes that I realized my mistake, and then he recounts later on that after this I continued to perform good deeds in hoping that Allah would forgive me for what I've done, right? And he freed slaves, he fasted, he prayed tahajjud, and prayed many nights. And he said, I continued to do these things until I feel I had made things up, right? So and later on, he said, on the day of Hudaibiyah, the Prophet ﷺ put a condition on us, and if any other leader had put that condition on me, I would never have accepted it, right? So he's basically saying, this was too much to swallow. If anyone had said that, I wouldn't have followed him. right? But he recognized in him verbalizing these things, he was actually, he committed a grave error. So in order to overturn that, basically he said, and this is good practice for us. When we do something bad or something evil, the thing that cancels it out is lots of good deeds. That Umar is saying, look, after this, I know I've done wrong, and I really had to make it up to Allah. I freed slaves, I fasted, I did lots of, good things. I prayed at night, and I did it with so much intensity until I felt that I've done enough that Allah would overlook this one sin, or this error that he'd done, right? But again, this sense of frustration was not just with Umar. The Prophet ﷺ had this frustration. All the Muslims had this, frustration. This was common amongst them, and lots of Sahabi have mentioned this, and one of the other famous Sahabi, Suhail ibn Hanif, he said when the Muslims are about to fight one of the big battles, he's doing his pre-war sort of geeing up of the troops, and he goes, on the day of Abu Jandal, when they're signing this treaty, if I could have rejected the command of the Prophet ﷺ, I would have done so, right? But we have to obey Allah and His Messenger, and we must accuse our own opinions first, right? So basically saying, right, and again, he's just being honest, if there was any one time I could have disobeyed the Prophet, I would have done it on that day, because this was just unbelievable. And we'll see how collectively how the Muslims disobeyed him on a minor thing when they're shaving their heads, right? But he says, look, if we were going to reject anything from the Prophet's mouth, we would have rejected the Treaty of Hudaibiyah, because it was just completely unacceptable for them, right? So you can see how much this really bared upon the Muslims, right? And so the learning from that is that if we do wrong, let's try to wipe away that by doing good deeds and excelling ourselves in those good deeds, right? And that's what Umar bin al-Khattab, he admitted to and demonstrated that to us, and he was honest in that. So look, I regretted that day, and because I know I did wrong, and he wants the books of history to recognize that he did wrong, but he tried to make it up in how he thought it could be done, and it was natural that the emotions got the better of him. He went beyond the boundaries. He was publicly challenging the decision of his leader, who happens to be the Prophet of Allah. And the Prophet of Allah had said he has to obey these things, because this is the wahy of Allah. He has to do this, right? And Umar ibn al-Khattab is not acting out of malice, or this is not a political game or strategy. He's not trying to become leader. He's not trying to usurp the Prophet his position, or undermine him, or create a mutiny. He has a deep love for Islam, the superiority of Islam, and it's that frustration. He can't see the Muslims and Islam being humiliated like this, that he's undertaking this extreme action. And again, you get a sense of this where the Prophet he then he stands up after all of this, all these negotiations, and Umar is saying all of this. So he stands up and he then turns around and says, "Shave your heads and let's return." And this is completely bizarre, and the Muslims are dumbfounded on two accounts. A, they've just been humiliated, but B, what's this shaving of the head? You can't shave your heads unless you've gone to the Kaaba and done Umrah. But the Prophet is telling us to shave our heads as if we've gone to the Kaaba, right? And the Prophet then says, repeated a second time, "O Sahabi, or O people, stand up, shave your heads, and let us return." Nobody moved. And then he said a third time, "Stand up, shave your heads, and let us return." and no one moves. So you can see how the situation is. Collectively, all the Muslims are not obeying the Prophet. Later on, the scholars say they interpreted it's not that they disobeyed him, it's just that they were hoping Allah would send wahi that would turn things around. And the Prophet, he storms back into his tent and he goes to his wife Umme Salamah and he goes, woe to these people, right? I commanded them to shave their heads, but none of them choose to follow me. And this is unbelievable. And Salamah, she, being the wise person, she gives the best counsel to the Prophet ﷺ. And he goes, well, do you wish that they follow you? And he goes, yes, of course I do. She goes, well, why don't you show them what you are doing? And then when they see you doing it, they will follow you. So again, the Prophet ﷺ, he's caught up in all this, emotion. He's only human, and he's telling the people, he's ordering them, and they're not believing him. And he's stormed off, and he goes back, and his wife tells him the right thing to do. She understands him. She understands human psychology. She understands the people. She understands what needs to be done. She knows how to diffuse the situation. Goes, fine, you do it. They'll follow you. Don't worry about it. Chill. So, inshallah, we'll see whether that worked. Obviously, it did. Next time, inshallah, I have to go. It's obviously getting late. So, thank you for listening, for staying for so long. Alhamdulillah. And do remember us in your du'as. Do remember the Ummah in your du'as. Comments, queries, and questions, obviously, get in touch. And until next time, take care. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wa lasal innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Jazakallah khair, everybody. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.